Chapter 11. So bloody unlucky you are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Dragon Boat Translation Editor. Dragon Boat Translation. After a moment, the constables and their horses led Xianxia's family toward the entrance of the village. Wang Er creeped behind them, a vicious glint in his eyes. Xianxia and Qin saw everything and worried. On the other hand, Xianxia seemed carefree. He shouted out to Arya, who was in the crowd, "Arya, help me feed Lao He. Don't let him go hungry and lose weight." "Brother Chen, don't worry," Arya answered shyly. Her eyes were also filled with worry. Xianxia smiled at her reply. He followed the constables and walked toward the front of the village. Today, he would see what show these people would put on. A few minutes later, after the group had left the entrance of the village, Wang Er couldn't wait anymore. He walked from the back of the group to the front, whispering to Constable Zhou, "Master Wang said this family must be taken care of." When Constable Zhou heard the words, he calmly replied, "We need to talk about the price though. You told me before that we were just here to collect the corpses." "That isn't a problem, but they must be taken care of on the road," Wang Er said harshly. The backstory of the Wang family was a bit disgraceful. If the Qin family was brought to the government office in the county, it would not be good for their nonsense to get out. It was better to take care of them on the road and prevent any further mishaps. A strange glint flashed in Constable Zhou's eyes as he said, "Killing on the road. The price is even higher. After all, it's not a righteous thing to do." "No problem," Wang Er replied without any hesitation. Their Wang family had plenty of money. "Great. Then I will take them into the stone forest 5 miles away, and we will take care of them there." "Perfect," Wang Er responded and returned to the back of the group. When passing by Xianxia's family, he did not forget to glance at Xianxia as if he was already doomed. Xianxia sneered to himself. With his current hearing, he could hear the conversation between Wang Er and Constable Zhou very clearly. "Stone forest 5 miles away. Humph. None of them are good. Little Chen, I have a feeling that they were up to no good just now. If anything happens, I will delay them. Take your mother to grab a horse and escape. Don't look back. Do you understand?" Xianxia asked with a low voice. He looked as if he was ready to face death unflinchingly. As a man, he had no hesitation at this time. "Dad, don't worry. Maybe they are all good people," Xianxia smiled and comforted him. Qin saw this and sighed to herself. Her son was perfect. His only flaw was that he was too kind, he didn't know that people could be evil. "Little Chen. There are many bad people out there. You have to be careful." Qin rubbed her son's head, her face showing dismay. Where could she run to as a woman? If something happened later, she would, at most, distract those people and make it possible for Xianxia to escape. Xianxia gave his parents a relaxed look, then quickened his pace and wandered around the group. When Wang Er noticed this, closely following behind Xianxia, afraid he'd run away. "System, find me some bad luck. Like how I ran into the wolf last night. Walking 8 meters at 20 degrees ahead, you will step on a hidden pile of cow dung." Hearing this, Xianxia sped up and immediately walked forward in the direction shown by the system. His perception was keen, and after spotting the cow dung, he calmly stepped over it. Wang Er stared at Xianxia closely, quickening his pace once again without saying anything. After a while, he felt his feet become sticky. Looking down, he saw a pile of slimy cow dung covering his shoes. It was a dark blob and quite disgusting. D*mn. So bloody unlucky. Wang Er cursed, quickly moving his feet away. When he looked for Xianxia again, the young man was back to walking with the group. Xianxia was amused when he heard Wang Er's cursing. Today, he wanted to let the old guy know what was truly cruel. After the group walked forward more than 100 meters, Chen left them again, with Wang Er closely following him once more. He thought he had stepped on the feces by accident and didn't suspect anything. Just as he took a few steps, the foot that had stepped on cow dung before stepped on something else. The combination made him suddenly slip, and he fell backward. Sliding on dung. Today is so unlucky. Wang Er scolded himself in his heart, but he did not panic. As the steward of the Wang family, he knew some martial arts. When he leaned back, his body suddenly exerted strength, and he stood steadily on the ground with a beautiful backflip. The move was quite expert. If it weren't for the dung on his feet, it would be even better. However, the very next moment, he gasped as his face suddenly turned purple. He raised his foot and saw that there had been a sharp rock where he landed, now piercing his shoe and plunging into the sole of his foot. Bright red blood gushed out, and mixed with the dark dung, it looked even more disgusting. Ow! It hurts. It hurts. Wang Er's masterful demeanor disappeared instantly. He didn't care about the cow dung anymore, he picked up his foot and started screaming. All the constables were dumbfounded when they saw the scene. They had never seen anyone piercing their feet when they walked. And what was that dark blob? After constables realized what it was, they turned their heads in unison, not daring to look at it directly. It was so repulsive. Only Chen moved toward Wang Er with a concerned expression. "Steward Wang, are you all right? Maybe we shouldn't rush to the county government. Let's go back to the village and bandage your wound." Wang Er showed a fierce look when he heard those words. He roared, "This injury is nothing to me. D***mn, if it wasn't for you untouchables, I would have looked at the almanac when I went out." Chen looked at the blood-stained stone and waved his hand earnestly. "Steward Wang, how can you be considered unlucky? Fortunately, it is just your foot that got hurt. If you had smashed and knocked your head, then what? You might have died young, right? You are so lucky." Hearing Chen's words, Wang Er's eyes flickered and his heart became full of fear. Had it not been for the backflip, he might have knocked his head, and if his head had been pierced by the stone. Wang Er didn't dare to think about it anymore, limping back to the group with a sullen face. At the same time, he promised himself he would be really careful when walking from now on. At the front of the group, Constable Zhou frowned when he saw this. He ordered, "Steward Wang, there is a river in front of the woods. Go and wash up." He was taking advantage of the situation and using this as an excuse to bring Chen's family into the woods. "Right. Thank you, Constable Zhou." Wang Er bowed his hands in thanks but gasped again after saying this. The feeling of cow dung seeping into the wound was really uncomfortable, making him want to die. At this moment, he couldn't be bothered to follow Chen. He just wanted to go into the river to clean his wound, otherwise his foot might be done for. However, he didn't know that. This was just the beginning for him. Chapter 12. I Met a Fairy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Dragon Boat Translation Editor. Dragon Boat Translation. For the rest of the journey, Wang Er was about as cautious as he could possibly be, constantly reminded of the massive pain. Finally, the team made it to the creek just before the stone forest. Wang Er immediately rushed to wash his wounds in the river, while all the constables laughed on the inside as they saw the scene. They had seen unlucky individuals, but this was a first. "Xiao Chen, the stone forest is straight ahead. It's normally quite empty here. If they want to do something, they will do it here. But given the amount of thorns inside, it's impossible for their horses to go fast, so you have a good shot of escaping. If you are able to successfully flee, don't think of avenging anyone, okay? Just keep living on, do you understand?" Chen Shan and his wife didn't have time to laugh about Wang Er. They knew very well what the stone forest was like. The only reason they didn't oppose Constable Zhou's proposal to go from there was because Chen Chen had a much better chance of fleeing from here than anywhere else. A horse is a necessity to flee from other places, but how is robbing a horse an easy feat? Father, mother, don't worry. I will be good, you will see. Chen Chen comforted them as he looked at Wang Er washing his wounds next to the river, a weird smile blooming on his face. One moment later, Wang Er was finally finished with his wound, and as he returned, he stared at Chen Chen with an insidious look. While washing his wound, he found Chen Chen more and more responsible for his injury. Were it not for the fact that this lad had been running around for no reason, why else would he be up to this? Since the stone forest was just ahead, he didn't want to hide anymore. With this in mind, he mouthed towards Chen Chen, "You are done." Accompanying that statement was a ferocious smile. Chen Chen pretended that he simply didn't see it. Instead, he looked up at the blue sky and white clouds, his face full of joy, as if he was going out for a trip. This made Wang Er even more infuriated. "Housekeeper Wang, let's go if you're done." Constable Zhou, who was leading the team, paid extra emphasis on the go, clearly hinting at something. Housekeeper Wang nodded angrily, following the group. This time, the lesson had been learned. Not only did he follow the group at all times, he paid extra attention to the ground, walking as carefully as one would on a single-plank bridge. He just did not believe that he could end up with bad luck with such caution. In the grass, 8 meters left from the straight path, there is a wildlife trap. Behind the tree in front, there is feces from a wild wolf. Inside the forest, the number of messy items such as the ones the system reported immediately increased. However, Chen Chen knew, just by looking at the caution Wang Er was practicing, that he was not about to run over any of them. Therefore, he didn't try to get Wang Er to leave the group, instead choosing to wait for better opportunities. There is a beehive 13 meters right of the straight path. Upon contact, it will fall down. Upon hearing the system's reminder, Chen Chen immediately turned his head to the right. As expected, on a tree not too far away, there was a beehive. If they walked normally, they wouldn't touch the beehive in any way. But was Chen Chen intending to let the group move normally? Clearly not. Chen Chen secretly picked up a small rock on the ground as he walked, and as he got to the closest point from the beehive, he ejected the rock from his fingers. Pa! The beehive promptly fell. Bzzzzzzz. Hundreds of wasps, each about the size of a broad bean, poured out of the beehive and soon discovered the group. The constables could hear the weird sound, and upon looking at the source, they nearly got heart attacks. Wasps! Run! Constable Zhou shouted as he dashed away with his horse. At this point, he can't care for anything else. Wasps in forests were no easy feat. If one were to be attacked by a group of wasps, anything from disfigurement to death may end up occurring. No amount of money was worth such an expense. The other constables, seeing that their lead had fled, didn't worry about other things either, immediately following their leader and fleeing. And just like that, Chen Chen's household and Wang Er had been forfeited. "Father, mother, quick, we need to move." Chen Chen dragged his parents and ran behind the several constables as he spoke, leaving Wang Er standing alone and utterly confused. He also wished to run, but given his injured feet, he can't go fast enough. As he looked at the wasps flying towards him, Wang Er called out, "Wait for me." He tried to keep up with Chen Chen's household, but his speed was inadequate, and he soon got caught up by the wasps. Soon, Wang Er's screams poured throughout the forest. "Father, shall we flee with this opportunity?" Qin Ro, seeing that nobody was attending to them anymore, can't help but ask. Chen Shan, hearing her, was intrigued. "Father, mother, there is no need. We need to solve this problem anyway. It's fine if we go to the county office. Stone Village is our home, and we committed no crimes, so why run away? Also, Lao He is still at home. If we were to flee, Arya would not be able to have fully fed him." Chen Chen laughed as he ran away. Several wasps tried to bite Xianxia and his wife, but under the force of Qin Chen's stare, they promptly returned to target Wang Er. Cultivating immortality was a raise in the class of life. He was already able to create absolute deterrence against low-class organisms like wasps. Qin Shan, after listening to this, wanted to speak up about something, but didn't. Qin Chen waved his hands and said, "Father, trust me. You will be fine with me. Do you know why I left last night? Recently, I had dreamt about a fairy quite a bit. The fairy asked that I meet him at a specific spot. I disregarded it all as dreams for the last several days, but when I went there last night for a look, the fairy was indeed there." "What? Xiao Chen, you met a fairy?" Qin Shan and Qin Ro were both very surprised. In their eyes, it was extremely unthinkable. "Yes. Why would I go out in the middle of the night otherwise? After meeting the fairy, I learned much from him. Trust me, I have enough power to protect you," Qin Chen explained, looking serious. He couldn't make anything up other than this poorly fabricated lie. At this point, he had to expend the credibility he had accumulated over the course of more than a decade. He had to tell his parents about his immortality cultivation anyway. Sichuan County was just too small to make full use of the system. According to his plans, the best place to go was an area with fairy characteristics, with magnificent mountains and fine water. Using the system, he would most surely be on the right track. At that point, he would be away from the home. His only concern was his parents. Fairies. I can't imagine my son cultivating immortality. Qin Ro was very excited, her face reading, "My son is the best on earth." Qin Shan remained silent, but he had a great deal of trust over his child, especially given his extended record of maturity. Of course, the main reason was that it wasn't the time for talking. Neither did either of the parents know anything about cultivating immortality. Several minutes later, the wasps were gone. The several constables who had run ahead had also returned. Constable Zhou's eyes showed surprise at finding out that Qin Chen's household didn't just flee. "Where's housekeeper Wang?" a constable asked. Qin Chen pointed not too far behind him when he heard the question. At that point, Wang Er was lying in the center of the path, his head swelling to the size of a pig's head and his body twitching non-stop. He looked as miserable as he could possibly get. Chapter 13. Doomed by Cow Manure. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Dragon Boat Translation Editor. Dragon Boat Translation. Constable Zhou's eyes uncontrollably blinked as he took in the scene. This housekeeper Wang was not regularly unlucky, it was quite like Mr. Unlucky's mother opening the door for Mr. Unlucky proper. A touch-base of unluckiness. Coughing, Zhou instructed them, "Let's get housekeeper Wang on horseback and send him to the county town for a diagnosis." Upon hearing those orders, the constables immediately moved to Wang Er's side and lifted him onto the horse. Wang Er, being hung on the horse, was only growing more and more infuriated, the target of his ire still Qin Chen's household. Had it not been for the three of them running, he wouldn't have ended up like this. Thinking of this, his uninjured eye kept staring at Qin Chen, as ferociously as it could possibly get. Qin Chen shivered. This was so frightening. Wang Er was being hung on top of a horse, his swollen head making him look like a monster, that the only human-like thing on his face was his one eye. And he was still staring at Qin Chen. This shape. Were it to be left in the haunted houses of his past life, hordes of children would have broken into tears. "Housekeeper Wang, are you fine?" Constable Zhou asked, coming closer. His true meaning was clear. "Will you die?" If he were to die, without a testifier in the wilderness, how could he get his money back after the business was done? Erg. Wang Er tried to speak but his mouth was already swollen to the size of a pot, therefore, he can only make rumbled sounds, not anything that could be understood. He angrily stared at Qin Chen again, then turned his head to Constable Zhou for reassurance. Chen Chen was quite amazed by this as he observed what was occurring. Housekeeper Wang was indeed the housekeeper of a major household. Even if he only had a single working eye, he could still express his intentions. An impressive person indeed. Seeing this, Constable Zhou became indecisive. At this point, he felt a sense of palpitation. Then, the horses screamed towards the sky. Before anyone could react, the horses dashed towards the depth of the forest, as if they had gone insane. Hung on the back of a horse, Wang Er's face was too swollen for his emotions to be interpreted, but his eyes showed infinite depths of shock, confusion, and helplessness. Like a child dragged to a school on his first day of class, Wang Er vanished into the forest. Housekeeper Wang is being hijacked by the horse. Chen Chen looked from afar, his face filled with sympathy. Constable Zhou finally understood the situation, yelling, "Run!" Several minutes later, the group of people found the horses enjoying fresh grass deep into the forest. Meanwhile, Wang Er was lying below a horse, his neck distorted, and his breath gone. His only functional eye was filled with emptiness. He broke his neck and died. Constable Zhou's shock was unparalleled. A person with martial arts skills walking with him for a few kilometers and then getting killed by being thrown off of a horse after various accidents. Who would ever believe that? But the truth was here. The corpse was still warm too. Chen Chen squatted down with a face full of sympathy, closing his eyes for Wang Er and sighing. Housekeeper Wang was fine in all manners, except for being a good folk. He had done too many bad things, and here is his retribution. Oh! Learning Chen Chen's words, Constable Zhou's eyes showed signs of fear. He really had no idea how Housekeeper Wang could be up to such bad luck other than retribution. Housekeeper Wang, don't think about killing that much in your next life. See? Even heaven can't take it. If heaven can't take it, no amount of martial arts will be of use. Chen Chen's seemingly unintentional words only brought more cold sweat to Constable Zhou's face. He had done quite some orders of assassination-related business, but in terms of martial arts, he wasn't that much better than Housekeeper Wang. Looking at Housekeeper Wang's miserable death, he felt like he was being hit by thunder. Was retribution a real thing? As he thought of this, he decided that he would be a good person from today onwards. Brother, let's go. At the county office, please do testify for us. That Housekeeper Wang died of bad luck, not due to our intentions. Constable Zhou walked beside Chen Chen, his tone somewhat shaky and his words much friendlier than before. Chen Chen stood up as he heard the words, smiling as he replied, "Certainly. Good civilians such as us never lie." Constable Zhou was already tossing away any remaining plans to assassinate Chen Chen's household. Sweating as he nodded, his face looked quite like a servant of the people. Chen Shan and Qin Ro were also staring at each other, trying to figure out what they had just seen, which was difficult to believe. Wang Er, who had been enjoying his authoritative power and exploitative joys for decades, had just died without any clear reasons. How could there be so many incidents in the world? After that, the group continued to move towards the county town, now with 2 corpses on horseback instead of 1. For the remainder of the trip, every single constable practiced the highest degree of caution. If one were to look at them without context, one may as well assume that those constables were targeted by criminals on the wanted list. However, no more incidents took place over the course of the trip. Everybody arrived at the county office without any further issues. The county magistrate was a person with high levels of cultivation. He would not show up without major businesses. Minor issues such as these were all handled by the workers within the county office. Upon Wang Er's death, nobody was willing to pay for Chen Chen's family to be assassinated, eliminating Constable Zhou's incentive. Additionally, upon seeing Wang Er's death, he had decided that he should be a good person. Therefore, he did not give any further difficulties to Chen Chen's family. After confirming Wei Laosan's identity as an assassin, he even awarded them a pennant that read, "Eliminating harms for the people," giving them extra praise on the way. Chen Chen's family returned to the stone village happily with the pennant. On the other hand, Wang Hu's face was about as grim as it could get as he looked at Wang Er, whose face was already unrecognizable. By asking Wang Er to get rid of that household, he'd already paid an exceptionally heavy emphasis. But then, in a mere day's time, Wang Er was lying dead in front of him, and in a way that not even his mother could recognize his face. "Father, how did housekeeper Wang die? How can he be like this?" Wang Suqin angrily asked at his side. Wang Hu was only more infuriated when he heard the question, tossing a piece of a silk book to Wang Suqin. "Look at it yourself. That's what the county office wrote on his death certificate." Wang Suqin grabbed the silk book, and as she continued reading, the fury in her eyes became nearly uncontainable. During the trip, housekeeper Wang stepped on a piece of cow manure by mistake. Then, due to the aforementioned incident, a slip occurred. Housekeeper Wang flipped 360 degrees mid-air, and as he landed, he stepped onto a thin, sharp rock, injuring his foot. Later, inside the forest, he encountered wasps. Due to the aforementioned foot injury, housekeeper Wang was unable to run away as fast as the others, therefore becoming severely injured by the wasps. After those severe injuries, the constables put housekeeper Wang on the horse, intending to have him carried to the county center for treatments. However, the horses were suddenly frightened, dashing deep into the forest with housekeeper Wang. Housekeeper Wang fell from the horse and broke his neck in the process, resulting in his death. This is ridiculous. What are those people in the county office doing? Do they think the Wang household is a household of idiots? Not even storytellers would dare to forge such stories. Wang Suqin tore the silk book apart as she yelled. Wang Hu, learning those words, puts on a fake smile. They must be using this opportunity to warn our household. Ha, Wang Er died due to a piece of cow manure. They are indeed experts on humiliation. Wang Suqin's facial expressions turned around several times as she heard this. A moment later, she sneered and said, "Last night, the gentleman of Zhang household was nearly killed in an assassination attempt. The two biggest households of the county are about to fight hard. They have a lot to keep them busy. By imposing such a warning on our household, it seems like they wish to stun us in order to prevent our involvement." Wang Hu nodded. After some careful thinking, he found this theory persuasive. "What about Chen Shan's family?" Wang Hu asked. "Tomorrow is the property rent collection day. I will visit the village myself. The county office will soon be in chaos. By refraining from the other two families' businesses, nobody can stop us," Wang Suqin said coldly. In the past, if they wished to kill some civilians, they had to do some amount of preparatory work to go through with that. But with Sichuan County on the verge of chaos, there was no need for that. Chapter 14. The True Intention Unveiled. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Dragon Boat Translation Editor. Dragon Boat Translation. The next day, people in Sichuan County were so rattled, they were running from their own shadows, not a single soul seen on the streets. All the constables of the county office had squared their shoulders, waiting for calamity to arrive. The Zhao family and the Zhang family had a long-standing feud. A few days ago, the son of the Zhang family had been murdered by assassins, which had detonated the strife between the two families. Last night, several violent fights had taken place on the streets between the two families, spilling blood everywhere. Who would dare to venture out in times like this? On the other hand, Stone Village wasn't quite peaceful either. There were a few dozen tall, burly horses at the entrance of the village, and every horse seated a robust guard from the Wang family. These people had battle knives on their waists, giving off an air of ferocity. They were nothing like the sidekicks that Lord Wang had brought with him previously. "Village chief, our second lady has arrived. Why haven't you come and received us?" As the powerful bellow sounded, the village chief walked out timidly. Despite having lived for many years, he couldn't help but be terrified by the battle array before his eyes. In the past, the steward of the Wang family would, at most, bring several ordinary house guards when they came to collect the farm rent. What were they trying to do this year? A massacre. Welcome. Second lady. The village chief bowed and cupped his fists, his attitude extremely humble and modest. All the villagers stepped out of their houses at that moment. Upon seeing so many newcomers, they were all frightened into silence. The chief remained bowed for a full minute. Only when he was so exhausted that he was trembling all over did a burly, white horse stride out slowly from among the crowd. On the white horse, Wang Suqin was clad in soft, red armor, her face icy cold and her eyes indifferent. Steward Wang has encountered an accident. This year, I have come over to collect the rent in person. I hope you won't make things difficult for me. Back then, Steward Wang only treated you with generosity and leniency because Sichuan County was peaceful. Now that riots have taken place in Sichuan County, our Wang family is not in good condition either. Therefore, the farm rent for this year will be increased by 50%. Right as Wang Suqin finished, a commotion ensued among the villagers. It did not matter whether Steward Wang really was generous or lenient. The point was, they had been victimized by the flood this year, and not a single grain had been harvested. In order to amass enough farm rent, they had gone bankrupt and were all in heavy debt. Worse still, the rent was increased by 50% this year. Wasn't she trying to push them to a dead end? The village chief was also infuriated by her words. With trembling hands, he retrieved a contract from his pocket. Second lady, we have been farming for the Wang family and the amount of farm rent has been decided from the start. How could you raise it at your own will? Before the village chief could finish, the contract was sliced into halves following the shriek of a sword. Wang Suqin sheathed her sword and spoke in a cold voice, I told you, Sichuan County is in deep chaos right now, and the rules have changed. I do not wish to reiterate words that I have spoken. The villagers exchanged glances upon hearing this, their faces turning pale. They had to be financially capable in order to afford the increment. There was no way they could make the money materialize out of nowhere. As though she had foreseen this, a guard beside Wang Suqin spoke up at that moment. The Wangs aren't trying to push you to a dead end. It is alright if you refuse to pay the rent. You just have to sign this slave deed and become slaves to the Wangs, and then this matter can be over and done with. The village chief began coughing vigorously upon hearing those words. The people of Stone Village were all farmers, but farmers were freemen, not slaves. However, if they signed the slave deed, they would become slaves to the Wang family. Their lives and deaths in total control by the Wangs. How could they allow that happen? We will go farm for the Zhaos and the Zhangs. Stone Village has always been a place for freemen. Why should we become slaves? Right. I do not want my child to be a slave before he is even born. Some young, high-spirited villagers shouted out complaints. The guard sneered upon hearing them, his eyes flickering with a cold gleam. The Zhangs and the Zhaos are engaged in a war at the moment, do you think they have time to care about you peasants? Let me tell you, Sichuan County is in deep chaos right now. If you happen to run into any accidents on the way to the other families, no one is going to take care of you. The tone of caution in his words was obvious. The villagers who were speaking just now all fell silent, their eyes full of despair. The village chief was weeping bitterly. With a thud, he knelt on the ground, begging Wang Suqin, second lady, please show us some mercy. Some children in our village haven't even grown up, I can't let them be slaves to someone else from such a young age. Wang Suqin's eyes were filled with disgust as she listened to him. A group of lowly people picking and choosing all the time. Was becoming slaves to the Wangs such a disgrace to their status? Outrageous. The guard at the side was good at observing countenance. Seeing that the second lady was displeased, he growled, "We are kind enough to offer you a job, but you don't want to be slaves. Look at you villagers, all ugly and unsightly with those slavish looks. You were born to be slaves. The second lady is just trying to let them serve their purpose. Now you are only being ungrateful. What more do you still have to grumble about?" After he finished growling, the guard tapped the village chief's cheek with the sheath of a knife, a provocative look on his face. Right at that moment, Chen suddenly showed up and stood in front of the village chief. He pushed the sheath aside and raised his head to look at the guard. "Is it true that if we pay the additional 50% on the farm rent, we don't have to sign the slave deed? Pay the farm rent or sign the slave deed. You have to make a choice today." The guard put the knife on his shoulder, his tone disdainful. In his opinion, this group of lowly peasants could hardly afford to pay the original amount in the past, let alone paying the additional 50%. They were determined to force these peasants to become slaves today. The Zhangs and the Zhaos were engrossed in an intense battle, but in the end, both families would sustain great losses. The Wangs could seize this opportunity to rise. They might even obtain a great number of new farmyards. How do you make the most out of the new farmyards? By having these peasants labor away, of course. Once these peasants became slaves, the Wangs could exploit them to the extreme, as long as they did not die of exhaustion. As for the elderly, the weak, the ill, and the disabled, they should roll up their sleeves and get down to the fields as well. Instead of dying of sickness at home, they might as well die in the fields. That would maximize their worth. Upon hearing his words, Chen took a deep glance at the guard and began laughing unexpectedly. Loudly, he proclaimed, "Stone Village has 50 households. Theoretically, every household should pay 1,200 pennies, which adds up to 60,000 pennies in total. Now that you have increased the amount by 50%, it will be 90,000 pennies. I will pay the additional 30,000 pennies, which is equivalent to 30 taels of silver total." Upon finishing speaking, Chen fished out 30 taels of silver from his pocket and placed them on the stone tablet at the village entrance. As the popular saying went, the money one picks up does not belong to him. Thus, Chen did not feel sorry for himself at all. Apart from that, he had always been treated well throughout the many years he had lived in Stone Village. It was his obligation to pay that small amount of money for the villagers. Most importantly, he knew that even after making the payment, there was bound to be a fight today. With the battle array of the Wangs, they wouldn't possibly leave so easily just because they received the 30 taels of silver. He had to seize the chance to establish an absolute prestige in Stone Village. That way, when he went away for cultivation in the future, his parents would have a group of loyal people to take care of them. As they beheld the shiny silver, all the guards and the villagers dropped their jaws in awe. 30 taels of silver did not sound like a big amount, but it was considered an enormous sum to the villagers of Stone Village. They might not be able to amass it even if they sold off several households. However, Chen displayed it all without even batting an eyelid. This made them wonder if they were dreaming. "Chen. From tomorrow onwards, you will be the village chief." The village chief, who was shivering with agitation, gave his village chief post to Chen right away. Chen was rather speechless. Did he look like someone that was longing to be the village chief? The face of the lead guard turned extremely awful as he watched the scene. Were the Wangs really concerned about 30 taels? Their true intention was to enslave all the villagers of Stone Village, wanting to exploit them generation after generation. By then, their value would be far more than anything 30 taels of silver could compare to. Having thought of that, the guard shot a glance at Wang Suqin. Wang Suqin did not speak a word, staring coldly at Chen, who was standing in front of the stone tablet. She slowly unsheathed the long sword in her hand. Chapter 15. Do you have the right? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Dragon Boat Translation Editor. Dragon Boat Translation, are you that bad kind from the Qin family? Wang Suqin points at Chen Chen with her sword, her voice freezing cold. Chen Chen ignored the sharp sword, calmly stating, I was born with a clear background. How am I a bad kind? If the second lady of our house says you are a bad kind, then you are a bad kind. How dare you rebut? The servants next to Wang Suqin immediately pulled out their swords, speaking with grudging faces. Other servants saw the scene and immediately pulled out their swords. The atmosphere immediately intensified. The villagers found this unacceptable. The village head stood up from the ground, standing in front of Chen Chen, saying bitterly, my second lady, since Stone Village can afford the land rent, for what reason is this happening? Wang Suqin sneered at the words, abruptly saying, this bad kind from the Chens must have stolen property from the Wang household. How would he procure 30 taels of silver otherwise? This is precisely the second reason for my visit here. The village head's face promptly froze at the words. He had seen Chen Chen grow up and knew his character. How could he be capable of stealing anything? Second lady, Xiao Chen's character can be verified by every person in Stone Village. Stealing is not possible for him. I am willing to stake my life on this. Other villagers soon followed suit. Exactly, how can Xiao Chen steal? Watch your words. He isn't stealing even if I am. This kid was known for his fine character from a young age. The villagers from the Stone Village were a rustic people. Given how Chen Chen was willing to solve the property rent affair with his 30 taels of silver, how could they neglect him now that he was being targeted by Ms. Wang's sword? Wang Suqin's face dimmed as she saw this. She only wanted to get rid of the Qin family. Massacring the entire village left no slaves for the Wang's lands and was against their best interest. Thinking of this, she changed course. This is a personal affair between the Wang and Qin households. If anyone is willing to seize this lad for me, their property rent for this year shall be waived. She simply did not believe that a group of untouchables could withstand the lure of money. She was determined to make the lad learn how rough the world was. However, even after a moment's silence, nobody moved. This made Wang Suqin somewhat mad. 3 years. The village head shook his head, looking at Wang Suqin somewhat sympathetically. Second lady, this is not a matter of money. Xiao Chen has not conducted such an act of stealing. We will not betray our consciousness for money. How can we be good people otherwise? Wang Suqin's breath stopped at those words. The village head's words had punctured her heart like a needle. After a moment, she suddenly laughed up towards the sky. Ha ha ha. All of you villagers are truly untouchables. Consciousness. Why do you think you have the right to talk about that with me? Compared to Wang Suqin, Chen Chen was very satisfied. After stepping forward 2 steps without saying a word, he looked at Wang Suqin. Slowly, he spoke, back then, my father rescued your father, Wang Hu. He repaid him by claiming my father's military retributions, thereby building his grand household. The Wangs have never offered any compensation in the slightest since then. Now you are trying to repay mercy with hate. Let me ask you, were it not for my father, where would your household get its prosperity? Was it not for my father, where would you get your fine flowers, great horses, and hordes of servants? Now you are pointing your sword at me. I'm asking you, do you have the right? His statements silenced the village. Wang Suqin's face started changing colors. For some reason, looking at the teenager in front of her made her heart fill with worry. How could a teenager from the most lowly of backgrounds make such powerful and unreputable statements? Absolute garbage. A moment later, Wang Suqin shouted out in fury. But neither her flushed face nor her agitated breaths showed signs of stopping. Afterwards, Wang Suqin's horse slowly pulled back a bit. With some distance between them, her face became even more ferocious. Pointing the sword at the village, she ordered, kill that lad. Any person on the way shall also be killed. Any consequences shall be accounted for by the Wang family. Hearing this, the servants had bloodthirsty looks on their faces. At this point, no hiding was necessary. Da-da-da. Dozens of horses moved back to charge properly. The village head was very worried when he saw this. How could the villagers hold up against the charge of multiple horse riders? Village head, please go back, Chen said with a smile. But. No, but, they are too far to kill me, Chen comforted him, his young face showing no signs of worry. Xiao Chen. A concerning call carried out through the crowd. It was Chen's mother, Qin Ro. Chen Shan, meanwhile, stood next to Chen without saying a single word. As much as Chen had insisted that he had learned from a fairy, as his father, Chen Shan was still not willing to let him face that many unfriendly people. After all, he hadn't seen Chen's power with his own eyes. The Wang household is disregarding lives. How dare they forfeit such a fine boy like Xiao Chen? Shame on you. Xiao Chen, fear not. I, Uncle Qian, am not ready to see you die. A villager stood next to Chen in fury. Xiao Chen, you are covered by me. With someone in the lead, all the strong villagers stood next to Chen. With their scythes and hoes, they looked like a joke when compared to the high horses and sharp knives of their opponent. However, it most definitely moved Chen. For as poor as Stone Village was, its villagers were proudly united. Even in front of seemingly invincible enemies, they would stand beside him without a word. Thank you, everyone, Chen scanned their faces as he spoke quietly. From afar, Wang Suqin's face distorted as she saw the scene. She groaned, you bunch of untouchables. You really think I wouldn't dare to kill you? How laughable. Kill them all. We are massacring Stone Village today. Let me see who in Sichuan County can touch the Wangs. All the bodyguards licked their lips as they heard this. They were looking at the villagers as if they were sheep ready to slaughter. Then, the leading servant raised his fighting sword, making the pre-charge call. Charge with me. Anyone in our way must die. With that call, the several dozen high horses accelerated together, creating a curtain of dust, dashing towards the villagers like a thunderstorm. Compared to that, the villagers were like duckweeds in the middle of a hurricane, not as fragile as they may seem. Behind the villagers, many elderly, young, and female villagers had already broken into tears. Arya hid his head behind his mother's head. The several dozen horses were about to dash into the villagers as a massacre was initiated. The youth in the group suddenly took one step forward. His plain shirt moved without any wind present. This simple movement seemed to come with seemingly unparalleled reverence. Screech. The several dozen high horses were very frightened, screaming aloud together, as if they were not facing a group of villagers, but rather an abyss. The foremost horse lost its step, crashing into the ground with the servant. The others running behind it promptly followed suit. The seemingly invincible charge was dismantled in no time. Ultimately, no person or horse reached within a 3-meter radius of the youth. Chapter 16. Returning one's deeds to oneself. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Dragon Boat Translation Editor. Dragon Boat Translation. The ashes dissipated in a moment, a mess left behind in front of the stone steel. Several unlucky servants were crushed in a stampede by the horses and were now lying dead. Many others had suffered severe injuries in the fall and could only moan. Less than half of them could sit up on the ground in confusion, taking their time to understand the situation. Chen looked down at them, just like how they had done earlier. System, who's the strongest person within the 15-meter radius? Most definitely the inhibitor, the system gave a definite response. Chen smiled upon hearing this. The group of villagers looked at each other, their eyes filled with confusion. What was going on? Was there some invisible wall in front of the steel of the village? How could the Wang servants fall like this otherwise? Before anyone got a solid grip on the situation, Chen Chen slowly walked to the front, plainly saying, "If you wish to negotiate, then so will we. If you wish to play the fist game, then so will I." The area surrounding him was quiet. Wang Suqin, who had not joined the charge, finally got her horse to rest. As she heard his words, her eyes finally showed some signs of worry. Did the lad cause all these incidents? But how could a boy from a tenant's family have such abilities? She didn't even think about immortality cultivation. Immortality cultivation was her ultimate dream. Deep down, she refused to recognize that a tenant's son could achieve her dream. "You untouchable. Die now." The servant that had just led the charge suddenly jumped up, his machete swinging towards Chen Chen. Chen Chen doesn't even bother to look towards him. He simply kicked the servant's stomach. The kick was too fast to be fully viewed with the human eye, the momentum was astonishing. Pong! That servant flew into the air with a muffled sound. Quite literally, he flew. He stayed in midair, flying over 20 meters, landing, and finally rolling several meters before stopping. The consequence of such a severe hit can be imagined with ease. The servant died midair. Looking at the corpse in the distance, which looked like a broken bag, the scene only became quieter. Even those servants that were moaning previously didn't dare to make a sound. One moment later, the farming tools in the villagers' hands started falling to the ground. The surprise on their faces as they looked at the back of the youth in front of them was unparalleled. They had all seen Chen Chen grow up. Having seen how harmless he was, it was reasonable for them to be surprised when he kicked a man like a ball. He is a fairy," one of the servants shouted suddenly, breaking the silence. Bdnvl.m His words, like an asteroid striking a calm ocean, created massive waves. Fa. Fairy. How can it be? He is a fairy. Other servants crawled behind non-stop as they whispered. In this world, fairies were the most revered. In countless places, tales of fairies circulated. Being able to manipulate mountains and seas and being invincible were characteristics of a fairy, constituting the average person's impression of a fairy. If the youth in front of them was a potential fairy, how dare they organize further attacks? Wang Suqin was equally frightened at this point. Without the status of cultivation, there was no justification for the youth's ability to stun a group of horses and kick a man into flying. But if this youth had actual cultivation status, the Wang family. Wang Suqin didn't dare to think any further, her eyes turning red immediately. Pointing her sword towards Chen Chen, she ordered, "He only started cultivation recently and is not of much status. By moving together, we may be able to kill him." However, no servants follow her orders. These servants were already out of their guts by this point, their legs shivering. All they wanted were 2 more legs to assist them in fleeing. How dare they gamble their lives in this circumstance? That's a bunch of garbage. Wang Suqin was very infuriated. She jumped down from the horse, chopping off the head of a fleeing servant. Her clothes were rapidly dyed red as blood splashed out. With a twisted face, she looked as ferocious as a demon, straight from the inferno. Any person attempting to run will have his household eliminated. But if anybody here kills this evil being, I shall marry that person and bear children for him. This lucky person will enjoy all the riches of the Wang family. Following her statements, many servants become hesitant. The second lady was not only a beauty from a household of riches, but also a fine martial artist. In the eyes of the servants, she had long since been a goddess. They had likely tortured her countless times in their dreams. With this promise coming, it was impossible that they weren't moved at all. "We are dying anyway. Move!" A less severely injured servant groaned as he dragged his machete towards Chen Chen, his eyes insane. Other servants also picked up their machetes and prepared for another charge. At that point, Chen Chen kicked once again. This time, a hand-sized rock flew out, destroying the lunatic servant's head. Recalling how Wang Suqin had attempted to flirt the hearts of the villagers of the stone village, Chen suddenly smiled an evil smile. Speaking to the frightened servants, he said, "Kill her for your life. Of course, if you can seize her alive, you are welcome to do with her as you please, that I just want her dead. As for consequences, worry not, for the Wangs will be no more afterwards. Think carefully. Do you think you have better odds against me, a fairy, or her, a regular lady?" Chen's words circulated throughout the entire area. Unparalleled fear appears on Wang Suqin's face. She couldn't believe this all came from a teenager who looks about 16 years old. Other servants halted their steps, their heads staring at the ground, their thoughts unknown. Then, Chen added one sentence. "I need not lie as a fairy." Finally, servants started turning their heads. Soon, the 11 remaining servants all turned back, looking at Wang Suqin and her sword with cold eyes, their machetes reflecting the light. "What are you doing? You are the dogs of the Wangs." Wang Suqin exclaimed in fear. "Yeah. The Wangs never treated you like humans." This lady had no hesitation in chopping down that servant's head just now. "Why should you have any mercy on the Wangs?" Chen calmly asked them in front of the stone stele. In terms of heart manipulation, he was exponentially better as a time traveler who had been a human for 2 lives and had experienced modern society, especially when compared to the underqualified Wang Suqin. As expected, upon hearing those words, the servants were free of any mental load and started roaring at Wang Suqin. "You cheap lady! Die! I will kill you today!" Arms clash. In no time, the servants siege Wang Suqin and the sound of arms clashing pour into spectators' ears. The villagers, looking at the scene, can only conclude that they are currently living in a dream. Chapter 17. So there is a tomb. You are listening at novelfull.audio. L.C. Translator. Dragon Boat Translation Editor. Dragon Boat Translation. Several minutes later, the sounds of arms clashing stopped. Wang Suqin used her sword as a walking stick, several wounds now on her body. Surrounding her, the 11 servants all lay dead on the spot, their appearances wretched. "Impressive," Chen praised her, looking at the corpses. Looking at Chen, who had not been stained a single dust particle, Wang Suqin's eyes were as ferocious as they could possibly be. She said in a husky tone, "How vicious. You want to talk about rules with me, so I talk about rules with you. You want to play fists with me, so I play fists with you. How am I vicious?" Chen smiled as he talked. Wang Suqin had no words. By this point, she had only hatred and envy in her heart. How come this lad from such a lowly background could embark on the journey of cultivation, yet she couldn't? She hated heaven for its injustice. The next moment, she immediately turned to the horse, attempting to flee. But the moment she was on the horse, sounds of air pushing away could be heard. Before she could react, a sharp knife punctured her through her chest. She struggled to turn her head, seeing the lad in front of the stele with that same smile on his face, as if nothing had happened. Wang Suqin's fury reached its peaks at this point. Then, she dropped from the horse, her heart unwilling and her breath lost. Chen didn't speak anything at first. He quietly walked into the cluster of people, leading a stampede on any living servant. Soon, none of the Wang's people remained alive. All the villagers of Stone Village looked at the frightfully quiet scene. Chen sighed in his heart. He did not turn back to look at the villagers and his parents, only saying quietly, "This is a tough era, and sometimes killing is necessary to stop others from killing." Afterwards, he rode on Wang Suqin's white horse. Just before he made a visit to the Wang household, his mother's voice came from behind him. "Xiao Chen, be careful." Hearing this, Chen briefly stopped, then left on his horse without any further delays. The inhibitor has achieved achievement, killing, and has been awarded one opportunity for tracking within a 10-kilometer radius. Xianxia smiled upon receiving that information in his brain. While inferior to the original track within Sichuan County, this 10-kilometer tracking was still a pleasant surprise. Instead of rushing to use this opportunity, Xianxia continued to move towards the Wang family's house. System, anything of major worth within this 15-meter range? No. Throughout the ride, Xianxia utilized the system to his maximum advantage. After all, he finally got a transportation tool for use, and there was no reason to give up such a good searching opportunity. He had made some plans. He may as well be a sword fairy, riding swords for treasures across historic mountains and valleys. Wouldn't that be amazing? As he made those tentative plans inside his heart, the system gave him a different response in his brain. There is a tomb about to collapse, 14 meters underground to the left of you. It contains precious items. Hearing this, Xianxia immediately became alert. Tomb. Turns out, there are surprise discoveries. In theory, he, a fine teenager, should not steal from tombs. But then, this tomb was about to collapse. In that case, he shouldn't be blamed for his actions, right? Thinking this, he jumped off of his horse and went towards the location the system suggested. It was just a regular grassland next to the road. With fine grass on top, there were no signs of irregularities, never mind any signs of a tomb below. Xianxia walked above it for a bit, but there were no reactions. He then stomped on the ground. Suddenly, the ground collapsed. Thankfully, Xianxia reacted very fast at this point. By the time the ground collapsed, he had jumped out of range. As the dust settled, he walked closer for a look, making an interesting discovery. There was a coffin, as deteriorated as it could possibly be. Even the bones inside had rotten away, leaving only powder behind. In addition, there were some anti-theft traps and some sprinkling gears. It seemed like the traps had been quite delicate when they were still intact. But by this point, all that was left were some nearly rotten metal spikes pointing upwards towards the sky. This tomb may be older than Sichuan County itself. Xianxia said to himself, carefully poking the soil away. He soon found a delicate wooden box inside the rotten coffin. Using unknown materials, the box was somehow still in good shape and exuded a faint fragrance despite both the coffin and the bones having rotten away. There were precious items inside the wooden box, for sure. As a precaution against potential anti-theft mechanisms, Xianxia practiced the utmost caution, using a tree branch to flip the box open. He turned out to have thought too much. There were no mechanisms inside. All that was inside were 2 jade pamphlets and a small jade bottle. Inside the jade bottle, there were some elixir leftovers, clearly not for consumption. Xianxia shook his head, then took out the 2 jade pamphlets. The first read, Emu Mediumship Knack. The second read, Pyrokinesis Craft. Are these cultivation materials? Xianxia was stunned as he looked at the ashes inside the tomb. He didn't expect the deceased person to be a cultivator. But apparently, he wasn't on a particularly high tier. It was likely that he was on the same tier as Xianxia, simply on the top-tier stage of qi training. Otherwise, his bones wouldn't have been so rotten. As for the 2 secret books, they probably weren't top-notch techniques. Xianxia wasn't refusing it, however. Setting the Emu mediumship knack aside, he started reading the pyrokinesis craft with more detail. The so-called pyrokinesis was fundamentally a trick in the circulation of ethereality. Because of either Xianxia's high talents or the pyrokinesis craft's low difficulty, Xianxia could manipulate his ethereality and have his fingertip playing with fire after a quick read-through. Most importantly, he doesn't feel any pain on his finger. Interesting. Xianxia's eyes shone. He finally found a piece of interest beyond his reach in his last life in this world. Being in a rush to kill the Wangs, Xianxia didn't spend any more time on it. Packing up the jade pamphlet, he buried the tomb once again. After all, having obtained items from this individual, he should show some sign of appreciation by not leaving his body exposed in the open, even though this fellow practitioner's bones were nearly gone. As Chen Chen buried the tomb and prepared to leave, sounds of horse running came from the end of the road. Soon, around 12 men entered his eyesight. "Stop running. Kill him. You are dying today." Looking at the scene before him, Chen Chen's face turned grim. After finding out the person being chased, his face became grimmer. "What's with this Mr. Zhang? He's being chased after and almost killed daily. Can we even get one peaceful day?" After commenting dryly in his heart, Chen Chen looks into the tomb, his heart somewhat frightened. Was it possible that the 2 jade pamphlets he had just received should have been found by Mr. Zhang? What was up with this Mr. Zhang? Was he an illegitimate child of heaven or something? As he wondered this in his heart, anxious calls from Mr. Zhang came from afar. "Please move out of the way, my young man. These people behind me won't even blink an eye at an accidental kill." Hearing this, Chen Chen hurried off of the road with his horse. The approximately 12 horses soon approached Chen Chen. The group chasing behind Mr. Zhang were in similar outfits to the one worn by the servants of the Wang household. They may very well have been servants of that household. As Mr. Zhang rode past Chen Chen with his horse, a servant chasing behind him noticed the wooden box in Chen Chen's hands. His eyes suddenly shone with greed, shouting, "This lad has a box made of agarwood in his hands." Screech. Learning of his words, every servant chasing behind Mr. Zhang halted their horse as they stared at Chen Chen, who was standing next to the road. Chapter 18. Please accept a salute from me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Dragon Boat Translation Editor. Dragon Boat Translation. "Kid, what's in that box?" the head servant asked with malice. "Are you from the Zhao family?" Chen Chen didn't reply, instead asking a question in return. The Zhao family was the largest family in Sichuan County. There were rumors that they had started off as horse bandits. Although they had rebranded themselves, they still occasionally do some robberies. There were 3 big families in Sichuan County. The Wang family did not dress in these kinds of clothes. With the Zhang family's son being hunted, the identity of these people was pretty easy to guess. "If you know we're from the Zhao family, leave it and get out," one servant shouted and took out a knife. They were in a rush to chase their target and had no time to waste. Duh. He never expected that the young Lord Zhang would turn back at this moment. "If you want to kill me, hunt me alone. Why are you bothering this young man?" Lord Zhang yelled while holding his sword. Chen Chen's eyes twitched when he heard the words. This Lord Zhang was really silly and naive. What, he wanted to be hunted and killed? In fact, Lord Zhang's mind was in turmoil. He had an extraordinary talent since he was a child. His memory was outstanding. On the day he was hunted by killers sent by the Zhao family, a young man with a face-covering face had suddenly jumped off of a cliff to distract the killers, allowing him to escape. He had branded the young man's voice deeply in his mind, often warning him. Just now, when he heard the young man speak, his voice sounded exactly the same as that of the masked man from that day. This made him subconsciously turn his head. After a closer look, his figure also matched. At that moment, he had already determined that this young man was his savior, but he didn't know how the young man had managed to survive after jumping off of the cliff. The savior had already saved his life without being thanked yet. How could he bear to endanger this savior once again, especially if he had surprisingly survived? His conscience wouldn't allow him to do so, so he turned back. Seeing Lord Zhang had returned to be caught, the head servant of the Zhao family chuckled so heartily, he almost ran out of breath. Haha. It is rumored that Lord Zhang has been extremely smart since he was a child, but I didn't expect him to be such a fool. The other servants also laughed. Instead of running away, Lord Zhang came back and asked why they didn't continue chasing him. How was this not stupid? He was a moron. Little bro, leave. I will block them for you. Lord Zhang ignored the ridiculing of the crowd and rode in front of Chen Chen. Chen Chen was completely speechless when he saw this. This guy was like the legendary Zhang Wuji, acting like a hero. No way. You wish. The head servant was in a good mood at the moment, and with a sudden wave of his hand, a few people came out behind him to completely trap Lord Zhang, while he himself rushed toward Chen Chen. Why do you think I want to run? How dare you rob me? I think you're looking for trouble. Chen Chen cursed to himself and at the same time quietly activated his fire control technique, his fingers soon lighting up. Lord Zhang was both surprised and angry as he yelled, "Savior, be careful." As soon as he spoke, Chen Chen suddenly pointed at the servant who was rushing over, shooting a finger-sized flame towards the man. In an instant, the servant was burned into a fireball and fell from the horse with a plop. After a few moments of struggling, he stopped moving. Then there was only a black mark in the shape of a person imprinted on the side of the road, indicating that this servant had once existed in this world. This power. Chen Chen's pupils shrank slightly. He couldn't sense the temperature of the flame, so he deliberately wanted to experiment. He didn't expect the power to be so terrifying. A person had been burned to ashes in mere seconds. With this type of efficiency, he could have made a fortune running a crematorium in his past life. While he was shocked, the Zhao family's servants who saw this scene were even more shocked and horrified. They were so scared, they couldn't even hold their knives steady anymore. F.A. Fairy. He's an immortal. Hearing their screams, Chen Chen glanced at them inadvertently, and all the horses, including Lord Zhang's, raised their heads and neighed, dumping all of the riders to the ground. Lord Zhang was very skilled. After he landed steadily, without a word, he began killing those frightened servants. It didn't take long for the entire group to die. After doing all of this, Lord Zhang looked back at Chen Chen. His gaze was complicated. Just now, when he had seen from the corner of his eyes how Chen Chen had shot out flames, he knew that the young man in front of him was not immortal. He didn't think the young man would save him again after saving him once before. The two life-saving graces made him feel as grateful as a surging river. So, without saying anything, he fell on one knee in front of Chen Chen. Yours truly, Zhang Ji. Thank you, big brother, for saving my life twice. Zhang Ji. Hearing this name, Chen Chen felt quite speechless. There was another person called Zhang Wuji, and his name was Zhang Ji. Why did he call him big brother? He was obviously much older than him. He didn't want to say anything. If he wanted him to be an older brother, he couldn't insist on being younger. Please rise. I just did it since it was convenient. It's no big deal. Chen Chen meant what he said. This Zhang Ji could be an illegitimate son of the heavens. He ran into opportunities everywhere. Every time Chen Chen took the opportunity from this guy, he would inevitably have to save him to pay for it. He was afraid that all of this was by heavenly arrangement. Zhang Ji's expression became serious when he heard the words, and solemnly said, although Big Brother is just casually helping Zhang Ji, you have remade me. This kindness will be remembered by Zhang Ji. If Big Brother orders me, Zhang Ji will go through fire for him and not hesitate. Listening to those words, Chen Chen felt a little embarrassed. He took advantage of other people's chances, but then they kneeled and thanked him. This was taking it too far. With this thought, he helped Zhang Ji stand up. Looking at the handsome man in front of him, who was only slightly less attractive than himself, Chen Chen suddenly had a thought. He asked in his mind, System, who is the one with the best luck in this 15-meter radius? He is in front of the host. Zhang Ji, with great luck and purple chi coming from the east. He is blessed. He is the son of destiny, rare in thousands of years. Hearing the system's comment, Xianxia silently cursed. He soon had another thought after cursing. If he accepted Zhang Ji as a brother, paired with his own tracking system, wouldn't he be invincible? Even if he could only track a few dozen meters, he could have bigger chances. With this idea, Chen put on a mysterious smile. Little brother, this is all meant to be. If it wasn't fate, how could I have saved you twice? Zhang Ji shivered when hearing the title of little brother. After a few minutes, the two became as close as biological brothers. Of course, this was partly due to Xianxia's bamboozling. The experience of 2 lifetimes, coupled with his brainwashing skills, made Zhang Ji dazed. If it weren't for the limited environment, Zhang would have liked to kneel and become blood brothers immediately. Brother Chen, there is something I shouldn't ask, but since we met so late, I really needed to ask, Zhang Ji asked after a while, growing serious. Go ahead. Chen waved his hand elegantly. Brother Chen, why did you want to commit suicide by jumping off of a cliff that day? Is there anything unspeakable? Although your younger brother is not talented, if Brother Chen has any difficulties, the younger brother is willing to go through fire to share Brother Chen's worries. Zhang Ji's expression was extremely heartfelt. Looking at his sincere and caring gaze, Chen patted him heavily on the shoulder, and thought to himself, silly kid, I jumped off the cliff to take your opportunity. You don't need to share my troubles. Better to reflect on why you're always being hunted. Noting Chen solemn look and his silence, Zhang Ji was even more anxious. He almost wanted to kneel again. But then Chen suddenly spoke. Brother, have you heard of the story of the baby eagle? Baby eagle? No, I haven't. Zhang Ji looked confused. Chen felt guilty bamboozling someone so stupid. So he turned his head and looked into the distance. It is said that if the baby eagles really want to learn to fly, the older eagles must toss them off the cliff. The young eagle can only develop its full potential when facing a life or death situation, learning how to navigate between the sky and earth. Zhang Ji, as someone who was into cultivation, had never heard this kind of self-help talk before. After hearing this myth, he was excited and emotional. Brother Chen, are you saying you jumped off the cliff to bring out your biggest potential? Training for some kind of craft? Chen patted Lord Zhang's shoulder again with a wistful gaze. He looked like someone who had bested countless opponents over the years, his face filled with loneliness. Dear brother, as long as you understand. Zhang Ji was so shocked by Chen's answer, he couldn't think of anything to say. Now it all made sense. No wonder Brother Chen looked so young but was already on a journey of cultivation. Brother Chen had incredible self-discipline. He jumped off of a 1,000-meter cliff without any hesitation. It was not a spirit he could have matched. At this thought, Zhang Ji admired him even more. He kneeled once again. Brother Chen. You really are my role model. Please accept my salute. Chapter 19. Arriving at the Wangs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Dragon Boat Translation Editor. Dragon Boat Translation. Chen blushed and helped Zhang Ji up. He asked in bewilderment, how did you offend the Zhao family? Why do they want to kill you? Zhang Ji stood up. His face was full of anger. Some time ago, an elder of the Tianyun clan passed through Sichuan County. He found out that I had the talent to cultivate immortality, so he gave me a token and asked me to go to Ji State on August 1st. On that day, the Tianyun clan would recruit disciples in Ji State, and I was supposed to enter the Tianyun clan with the token. Somehow, this news got leaked. The Zhao family and my own family have always been enemies. How could they allow me to go cultivate immortality? So they sent people to assassinate me. My father was so furious when he learned this that he went to war with the Zhao family. However, we are weaker than them. After the first battle, I was a little weak, so I went to a nearby village to gather help for my family. For some reason, I ran into assassins as soon as I left Sichuan County. Chen Chen sighed after hearing this account. Why did he keep saying, for some reason? It was obvious that the Zhang family had traitors among them. However, he didn't pay attention to that. He was more interested in the Tianyun clan. It was apparent that this was a clan for immortality cultivation. That's what he wanted to know the most about, he clans for cultivation. After pondering on it a bit, he gently asked, is this Tianyun clan powerful? Hearing Chen Chen's question, Zhang Ji's eyes widened in surprise, blurting out, of course they're powerful. The Tianyun clan is the strongest immortal clan in Ji state. There are more than a dozen affiliated sects under its command. Right, Brother Chen. Which clan are you with? How did you have time to come to our tiny Sichuan County? Chen Chen calmly replied, I was learning at home. What? I learned on my own. What? Zhang Ji exclaimed. He had never heard of learning cultivation by yourself. If this was true, Brother Chen must be immensely talented. If the Tianyun clan elder met Brother Chen instead of him, he would not leave any tokens but recruit him right away instead. Brother Chen is a man of true temperament, he wouldn't lie to me. Thinking this, Zhang Ji looked at Chen Chen with even more admiration than before. After a while, he suddenly became overjoyed and suggested, Brother Chen, why don't you go to the Tianyun clan with me? With your talent, you can definitely make something of yourself in their clan. That's a great idea, Chen Chen said with a smile. Zhang Ji's words were exactly what he wanted to hear, so he readily agreed. Great. Zhang Ji slapped his thigh, but then he looked despondent. Brother Chen is extremely talented, but my own talent is dull. I'm afraid it will be hard for me to reach your level in the future. Chen Chen couldn't say anything. Why was he beating himself up all of a sudden? After sighing, he comforted Zhang, don't worry, the most important thing for cultivation is luck. Your dumb luck is good, and you are destined to have a bright future. Ha! Luck. Zhang Ji thought he had misheard. Chen Chen knew that he had misspoke and quickly changed his words. The most important thing in cultivating immortality is perseverance. In fact, my own talent is also average. I reached my current cultivation level through hard work. Hearing this, Zhang Ji was energized. Thinking of Chen Chen jumping off the cliff, he was immediately inspired and regained his confidence. Brother Chen is absolutely right, but I have to call in reinforcements now, otherwise my family will suffer. In a few days, I will invite Brother Chen and we can drink and talk all night long. Zhang Ji finally remembered his mission. His expression changed as he got up on his horse. Chen Chen stopped him and said, it's not a big deal. I have to go to the county to do something anyway, so I will help you take care of the Zhao family along the way. How much combat power could the villagers have? Letting them participate in the battle will only be sacrificing them. Zhang Ji was silent for a moment. His gaze showed how touched he was. This Brother Chen had only met him twice, yet he was willing to help in this way. This kind of loyalty. Thinking of this, Zhang Ji's eyes became red, and these words appeared in his mind. A true friend is hard to find. Brother Chen. You. I have a younger sister. Zhang Ji was so moved he could hardly speak, his words all jumbled up. Let's go to the county. It's not a big deal, Chen Chen smiled as he got on the horse. He did not worry about Zhang Ji's safety when he offered to help him. This guy was very lucky, so he would probably be fine. He was more afraid that something would happen to this guy's parents. Then, like Zhang Wuji, if his parents were sacrificed, Zhang would go hide somewhere to practice magic. Then who would bring him to Ji State? He didn't exactly have a GPS. As for the Zhao family, they were bad people and could be destroyed. He could raid the family for riches so that when he left, he could provide his parents with a comfortable life, one that was free of farm work. The villagers in Stone Village should also stop farming and practice martial arts. Lao Hei the pig could also be taken care of by a dedicated person, getting fatter. Chen Chen started laughing as he thought of his grandiose plans. The two of them then rushed, reaching Sichuan County in a bit. There still weren't many people on the streets, only a few shops with half-closed doors. What did Brother Chen come to the county for? Did you want to buy something? Zhang Ji asked him curiously. You will know when you see it, Chen Chen answered with a smile. Soon, he arrived in front of a mansion on the east side. Two stone lions stood at the front of the mansion and a servant was guarding the door. This was the homestead of the Wang family. As one of the three major families in Sichuan County, the Wangs had 50 or 60 people in their household. Chen Chen's expression suddenly became serious while looking at the figures going back and forth beyond the door. Zhang Ji. Let me ask you. How will you deal with the Zhao family? I have to kill the entire family, of course, otherwise I can't go to the Tianyun clan safely, Zhang Ji replied easily. He may seem a little stupid to Chen Chen, but at least he understood some things. Chopping the grass without removing the roots meant that the spring breeze would help them to regrow. Kindness to the enemy was cruelty to oneself. Chen Chen smiled upon hearing his words. Well said. Chopping grass means taking care of the roots as well. As soon as he finished talking, the servant at the door seemed to recognize Chen Chen's white horse. The man's pupils shrank slightly and he immediately rushed inside. In a moment, nearly 20 people rushed out of the door, all of them holding steel knives and looking fierce. After these 20 people filled through the door of the Wang house, Wang Hu and another older man finally walked out. Seeing the older man, Zhang Ji's face changed as he shouted out, the Zhao family's steward. At a time like this, the Zhao family's steward being at the Wang house meant they were working on an alliance. The target of their alliance was obviously the Zhang family. At this thought, a cold sweat broke out on Zhang Ji's forehead. If these two big families joined forces against the Zhangs, his family would not be able to fight them. It was good that he had ran into Brother Chen today, or his family would have suffered a terrible fate. But what was Brother Chen doing at the Wangs? With his brain circuitry, it was impossible to connect Chen Chen's statement of doing something to the task of destroying the Wang family, one of the three major families. Who the hell are you? Why do you have my daughter's horse? Wang Hu yelled, pointing at Chen Chen. Chen Chen smiled grimly. How ridiculous was it that Wang Hu didn't even know him? He had never taken his family seriously at all. In Wang Hu's eyes, Chen Chen's family was most likely a nest of ants, meant to be killed at his will. The steward of the Zhao family looked at Zhang Ji, stating with a cold smile, I don't know who the kid is, but this is the son of the Zhang family. Master Wang, as long as you kill him today, the Zhao family will marry our daughter to your son. We'll give you ownership of 10 shops in town as part of the dowry. What do you think? Chapter 20. Destroying the Wang family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Dragon Boat Translation Editor. Dragon Boat Translation. Wang Hu didn't want to listen to Chen Chen at this time, only seeing the white horse Chen was riding. That was his daughter Wang Suqin's horse. Before he could ask more, Chen Chen said calmly, it's normal for you not to recognize me. My name is Chen Chen, Chen Shan is my dad. Do you understand now? When he said this, Wang Hu's face suddenly became gloomy. Earlier in the morning, Wang Suqin had said that she would take some people to Stone Village, bringing back the heads of the Chen family with her. Then why was the Chen kid riding his daughter's horse to his door? This really puzzled him. You untouchable, did my daughter ask you to come here and beg for mercy? Do you deserve to ride this horse? Come down this instant. Wang Hu rolled his eyes, thinking he had understood the situation. As for everyone in the Wang family being wiped out, it wasn't something he had even considered. Who would have expected an immortal to come out of a shabby tenant village? Insolent! Wang Hu, how dare you insult my elder brother? I will fight you to the death. Chen Chen didn't give any reaction, but Zhang Ji became angry. He drew his sword and pointed it at Wang Hu, shouting angrily. Wang Hu and Steward Zhao looked at each other and then at Zhang Ji as if he was a mentally disabled child. They thought this kid had become stupid somehow. He was 20 years old and the son of a prominent family. Yet he called a young man dressed in sackcloth, who seemed to be less than 18 years old, his elder brother. There was surely something wrong with him. Looking at Zhang Ji, who was more loyal than his Lao He, Chen Chen was a little speechless. He pointed and a ray of flame flew out of his finger, turning the guard at the front into ashes. Ever since he had learned how to control fire, Chen Chen had evolved from close combat to a more distant attack. And compared to kicking, this fire control technique was much more advanced and elegant, instantly distinguishing him from mortals, which had the added benefit of shocking people. Seeing this, the scene suddenly became so quiet, a needle dropping able to be heard. Whether it was a servant, Wang Hu, or Steward Zhao, everyone's eyes grew as big as copper bells. No one could believe what was happening. Was the young man riding a white horse in front of them? An immortal. If you have killed for the Wang family, end yourself. If you haven't killed for them, get out of here now and I will spare your life. As for the Wangs, they all have to die today. Chen Chen drew back his hand. His tone was light and carefree. The group of servants, who were normally as fierce as wolves, turned into sheep instantly. Their knives were tossed out in fright and they all knelt on the ground, begging Chen Chen for mercy. In this world, the deterrent power of immortals against mortals was indeed terrifying. Everyone who can get out, get out. I don't want to do more killing karma today, Chen Chen ordered while seated on the horse, secretly pleased. He couldn't help but think of the protagonists in those martial arts dramas from his previous life. As soon as they announced their names, something like South Murong or North Jiaofeng, people became terrified. It's a pity that I started so late, I haven't gotten a name yet. While he pondered over this, some of the servants had already thrown away their weapons and were about to run. System, who among these people deserves to die? Chen Chen asked in his mind while everyone was preparing to run. 5 meters on the left, 6 meters on the right, and 8 meters on the right. The system reported 5 people in a row. These 5 people, without exception, did not intend to end themselves. Chen Chen sneered, shooting a ray of flame at one of the faster servants, instantly burning him to ashes. I hope you know what bad things you have done. If you commit suicide, at least you can leave the body whole. Think about it. Hearing Chen Chen's words, the few who had killed people fell to the ground with weak legs. After a while, they were so frightened, they lost control of their bowels. This world believed that being buried upon death was best, and those who died without a whole body would not reincarnate. So, burning into ashes in their eyes was many times more terrifying than death itself. Earlier, when Chen Chen kicked someone to death in Stone Village, some Wang servants had still dared to fight him to the death, but now, by using the fire control technique, he had scared these servants out of their minds. Immortal. I'm wrong. I will be a good person in my next life, one servant cried and shouted, then slit his own throat. The remaining few were all scared, lying on the ground like dead dogs, unable to commit suicide. They had no way out. The immortal in front of them was too terrifying, and they couldn't even hide if they had killed before. To them, he was like God, unable to be resisted. As for the servants who had sinned less, they had all run off without a trace. Wang Hu and Steward Zhao had finally realized what was happening. Both of them were quite scared. Steward Zhao stopped mentioning the idea of the marriage. He wiped cold sweat off of his forehead and said, "Immortal, I was just passing by. I have nothing to do with this Wang family. Goodbye." He had already cursed 18 generations of the Wang family over and over in his mind. He had also figured out why Zhang Ji wanted to recognize this young man as an elder brother. The man was an immortal. Never mind Zhang Ji calling him elder brother, he could have made Steward Zhao, a man in his 50s, call him grandfather. Chen Chen glanced at him. That single look forced Steward Zhao to kneel on the ground. Immortal, I really have nothing to do with the Wang family. Keep kneeling. Yes. Steward Zhao responded. The cold sweat on his face was falling like rain, but he didn't dare to move an inch. As for Wang Hu, he was also panting heavily at this moment. He had realized by now what had happened to the Wang family crew who had gone over to Stone Village. Who would have known that a sudden evil thought would have ruined his whole family? Su Qin, you have ruined me. Wang Hu cursed in his heart, then picked up a knife on the ground and swiped it at his neck. Chen Chen's eyes twitched at this scene. At this moment, he had also fully realized the terrifying power of immortals in this world. He was afraid that some immortals had also done some bad things. Why would they scare a group of mortals into such a state otherwise? Brother Chen. This. The admiration in Zhang Ji's eyes went beyond words, but his vocabulary was really lacking, and he couldn't express himself very smoothly. Ji Chao, Wu Lu, Chen Chen said with a smile. Zhang Ji did not understand, but it did not affect his continued admiration. Then he seemed to think of something, and volunteered, Brother Chen, let me take care of the rest. I heard that after starting the path of immortality, it is not appropriate to slaughter many mortals. Otherwise, you will be hit with jealousy when you rise to heaven. If you were an ordinary cultivator, it would be fine, but in your case, Brother Chen, you will definitely rise. After saying this, Zhang Ji carried his sword and rushed into the Wang compound. Chen Chen marveled at his retreating shape. What a competent little brother he was. He was not only filled with confidence in his elder brother, he was also willing to volunteer and share his worries. Not only was he concerned for his elder brother, there was no need to worry about him dropping dead one day either. Even more importantly, he brought opportunities for his elder brother. This kind of little brother was comparable to a great opportunity, it was incredible to meet and impossible to find. He had to keep on bamboozling him and make him even more loyal.